What's up, it's ENDYMION, and today I got an update on a certain game franchise that could be getting ruined in the future and would be devastating if it ends up happening. We also got confirmation that some games are retroactively going backwards and censoring themselves on purpose. And finally, later on, I'll talk about an exciting update concerning Black Myth Wukong and how that game is already proving that it'll be a mega hit. But let's talk about this first story. So about a month back, I talked about how Insomniac Games has obviously decided to fully embrace identity politics in all forms. And then of course the Sweet Baby thing started, and developers went into total defense Shogun mode trying to stop the tide of backlash from coming for them, and that obviously didn't work really well at all. One of these defenders is named Mary Kenny, who worked at Insomniac at the time, and was calling Sweet Baby the best in the business and loved working with them. She worked on stuff like Spider-Man 2 and the upcoming Wolverine game as a narrative director, which doesn't fill me with confidence since Spider-Man 2's worst elements were its story and characters that felt nothing like their actual comic book counterparts. In fact, I would call Spider-Man 2's story a bastardization of Stan Lee's work that somehow forgot what it was doing around the 70% mark of the story, if not a little before that too. Look, Spider-Man 2 was a big disappointment for me, and like I said, the story was not good at all, which is exactly what this Mary Kenny person worked on in that game. Then we found out that this same narrative director has left Insomniac Games recently and is now going to work at CD Projekt Red on an untitled game. Many fans worried that this narrative destroyer would set their eyes on The Witcher 4, but now we got confirmation of what they're working on, and it is not filling me with confidence whatsoever, fellas. This comes from Park Place, CD Projekt Red developer Mary Kenny, who declared every lever must be pulled to push LGBTQ+ agenda, hints that she's working on Cyberpunk 2077 sequel. So this is good news if you're a Witcher fan, I guess, but really bad news if you were looking forward to the future of Cyberpunk like I am. So how do we know that this narrative director that ruined Spider-Man is now working on Cyberpunk sequel? She said this via LinkedIn. My inbox remains filled with people asking for the spicy tea on my recent job change, so this post is to assure everyone there is in fact no tea. Just a plate of vanilla wafers with pastel frosting. Insomniac and I didn't part on bad terms even a little. I wasn't fired. I adore my former fellow directors on Marvel's Wolverine, and I don't intend to let any of them fall out of touch with me. A lot of my work is still in that thing. I'm rooting for that game and all of Insomniac's future projects. Deciding to leave Insomniac was really hard. I had a great, fast-paced 5 years there with wonderful people I adore. But when I met the team and heard the details of Project Orion, I couldn't stay away. It's a dream project for me as a writer-gamer, no tea, all cookies, just excitement, great people, and cool projects. So from the mouth of the Destroyer themselves, we have confirmation that the person who championed Sweet Baby and ruined Spider-Man's hero's journey has now set their sights on Cyberpunk's sequel, which is currently called Codename Orion. Also doesn't fill me with any confidence knowing that their work has largely remained intact when it comes to Wolverine. I truly hope that Wolverine is a great game. We're long overdue for a solid story-driven Wolverine adventure in game form. And had this been 2018 Insomniac, I would have been very excited, but the truth is that they have been going down the woke route for a long time now. They did Miles Morales, which Sweet Baby worked on, and that game was fine for what it was, although it definitely was not better than Spider-Man 2018. Then you had Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, which was also a fine game mechanically, but to be real with you, I can't really remember much of the story besides the fact that there's a female variant of Ratchet that's called Rivet. It's so bizarre because I platinumed Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart and I genuinely cannot remember its story or characters that much. It was multiverse shenanigans, and Rivet was being pushed as the more de facto hero over Ratchet going forward. And now when I think about it, in retrospect, Insomniac has done this twice now to their leading legacy male characters. They did it with Ratchet, and then they pushed Miles in favor over Peter in Spider-Man as well. I'm telling you guys that X-23 will be in that Wolverine game. I bet money on it. And I can almost guarantee you that she will sideline Wolverine in terms of importance and eventually replace him in a sequel game. Also, I don't know if you guys know this, but this former Insomniac writer has their own website that details everything that they've worked on. And just looking at their game credentials, they wrote for Spider-Man Miles Morales, Spider-Man 2, and yeah, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart amongst them too. All games that promote identity politics and replaces legacy male characters with variants that enforce their agendas instead. And you can also see at the top that it's been updated to include the Cyberpunk sequel, which now makes me even more worried that we're going to be getting even more insufferable woke girl bosses in gaming, and this does not fill me with confidence. Oh god, it also turns out they wrote for Kotaku at one point as well. Great, as you can see in this article, there's their name right there. I should also remind you this was the same person who said we must pull every lever to enforce woke identity politics into gaming for the future, and claimed that there was not enough LGBTQ content in gaming and we need much more according to them. Even in the DualShockers article's highlights, it states that LGBTQ gamers don't feel seen enough and the industry has a long way to go in terms of representation apparently. Even though it seems like every other Western-made game these days features insufferable girl bosses, diversity galore, and many games, even Japanese ones, are starting to remove gender entirely when it comes to their character creators. Like recently, Terraria, a game that came out in 2011, has released a patch that does just that. As you can see here in this comparison provided by Park Place, the left side is from patch 1.4.4 and clearly has the male gender symbol within the character creation, but on the right, however, it has been removed in patch 1.4.5 and instead gender has been replaced with a body type option featuring various body types instead. This, to me, is reason enough to demand a refund if I was a player of that game. The reason being is because this means that many games and devs could pull the wool over people's eyes and still get what they want even a decade later. For example, imagine buying a game like Witcher 3 and it has very graphic scenes involving naked bodies and such. And then let's say that 10 years later, after CD Projekt has your money, that they decide to go back and censor all of that content and remove whatever they now deem problematic. Now they got your money, and they can adhere to modern day policies as well. Thankfully, CD Projekt has not done that to The Witcher, but this is what this Terraria change is pretty much. You're buying a product, believing that it is one thing, only to have it change behind your back once the transaction has long taken place. I find that disingenuous and very, very concerning because it means games could lie to you up front, just take your money, time, and dedication, then effectively commit censorship on themselves in the future. It brings up the whole Stellar Blade outfit controversy thing all over again, but this change here in Terraria is very deliberately being done on purpose to appease the woke crowd. There's no other reason for this existing in the first place. This also echoes an article back from 2020 from a site called Sausage Roll that I covered once, which has since been taken down, but the article has been archived thankfully, which was titled, "Naughty Dog made female characters less feminine to be trans-friendly." And we know this is true. I mean, in The Last of Us Part 2's case, we only need to look at Dina, who is Ellie's love interest, and here's a side-by-side comparison of Dina in-game versus the actual model that she's based on. And you can see that Naughty Dog deliberately went out of their way to reduce the curves and bust of the model in order to fit Dina more in line with what they wanted in-game, which again reinforces this narrative that these things are censored on purpose in order to appease activism. I'll repeat what the whistleblower Naughty Dog employee said, who spoke in this article anonymously. They said, and I quote, "This is the new norm. It's not really about the sexual objectification of women. Women, like men, come in all shapes and sizes. To say that having a big busty woman is unrealistic is untrue. This is only true for trans people. A trans woman can't naturally grow large breasts, and not all trans people can afford implants. If you see a game where the women are a little less curvy, it's not because the game designers are worried about receiving backlash for sexualizing women. It's because they are worried about offending the trans community. From a design standpoint, this is a really challenging problem. I've had many board meetings about how to tackle this. Trans people want realistic representation in our games, but they feel excluded if they are represented as too masculine or too feminine. That's why you will see a lot of designers nerfing the female form, so to speak, so that the difference between trans women and cis women is a little less noticeable, end quote. The deliberate censorship is on full display, and like I said, because this article from Sausage Roll was actual journalism that actually talked about something that people are curious about, it no longer exists on their website. So if someone tries to justify the erasure of gender in games, not only in game creators like Terraria, but in general like Naughty Dog has done, I need you to know that it's all being done deliberately. This is not by chance at all, and this is the sort of thing that circles us all the way back to that DualShockers article I was speaking about early involving Mary Kenny, Project Orion, Insomniac, and how the entire cultural sphere that surrounds us that suffocates creativity in the name of identity politics. And in that DualShockers article, they bring up GLAAD Gaming, which is a branch of the group called GLAAD, or Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation for short. According to them, more players identify as gay or other identities more than ever before, yet according to them, games only feature around 2% of trans characters in games today. I'll read you what this DualShockers article says because this will paint you a picture of what to expect when it comes to Project Orion once that Cyberpunk sequel happens. They said, and I quote, "Delving into GLAAD's latest report, Mary Kenny offers up two important insights. While one is a positive and welcoming outlook, as often the LGBTQ community wants to seek out safe spaces so they can feel accepted, the other is extremely worrying and disheartening. The GLAAD report tells us something key. Games are a way for LGBTQ people to socialize. But it also tells us something heartbreaking, that LGBTQ gamers don't feel that developers are thinking of them when they design games. Thankfully, there hasn't been a shortage of LGBTQ developers over the years. We have seen incredible talents coming from the minds of people like Maddie Thorson, who created the transgender character Madeline in the game Celeste. Catherine Mataga, a transgender programmer and founder of the independent video game studio Jungle Vision, who worked on X-Men Reign of Apocalypse as well as Spider-Man 2, and also D.E. Chaudhry from Larian Studios, a queer and non-binary video game developer who worked on Baldur's Gate 3, to name only a few. Kenny echoes this evidence by saying there are so many LGBTQ developers and we want what players want. To design experiences that tell the player that we're here, we're important, and we belong. This could become increasingly difficult as we see more and more pitches turned down amid one of the worst years ever for gaming. However, Kenny remains adamant that something has to give way to allow change to happen. We need to pull every lever we have, Kenny says, characters, community support, mechanics to make it so. It's a subject she's clearly passionate about and her insights are thought-provoking. Even though the gaming industry is touted as the modern entertainment giant and is worth more than film and music combined, it has a long way to go in terms of queer representation, end quote. It's interesting how Mary Kenny says, while pulling every lever, that LGBTQ+ themes must be represented in characters, community support, and even mechanics somehow. That last one doesn't even make much sense. How do you make being gay or whatever a mechanic in a game? Unless they mean how in some games like Fallout, there's perks that make you do more damage to men or women, which by the way is hilarious that it exists because it means Bethesda is claiming that there's only two genders if those sorts of perks exist in the first place. So I guess you can fully expect that at some point to get changed or removed entirely even after you bought it Terraria style. That really wouldn't surprise me one bit. But I think you need to ask yourselves, if you're just pushing this stuff because you have to, then you know it isn't genuine in the first place, right? And the fact that CD Projekt Red has hired this individual to be a senior writer on Project Orion, it's worrying to me. Look, I get it, it's cyberpunk. It's a game world where people can swap out body parts like their legs, hands, or install new lungs or hearts to enhance themselves. So the concept of changing gender in a world like that likely entices someone like Mary Kenny as being something that now they can explore. But in all honesty, to me anyways, the augmentation and all that, while important, was kind of secondary to the actual heart of what Cyberpunk was really about. Which is, what does humanity mean in a future where the world itself is lost in its own darkness and depravity? I trust CD Projekt Red to come up with good storytelling and writing, I've never in all of my years playing their games felt like that they fumbled their stories in any huge misleading ways myself. I always found that CD Projekt Red's biggest strengths, besides the, big open worlds and whatnot, has always been at their core their ability to write great stories and characters, no matter the setting or world. Whether it's the dangerous but magical world of The Witcher or the digital age of cyberpunk, they always strive to shine a light on true humanity amongst everything else. And it worries me greatly that someone who very clearly has worked on games like Spider-Man and Wolverine, and Ratchet & Clank, who has proven time and again to inject identity politics and ruin legacies in the name of pulling every lever, is pretty much being given full reign essentially to do whatever they want in the next cyberpunk game. If Mary Kenny was fine with sidelining Ratchet with Rivet or Peter with Miles, and likely Logan with Lara in Wolverine, not to mention ruining Spider-Man 2's story to the point that people got so mad that fans were actually telling others to not play it on social media, and then Spider-Man 2 ended up not being enough of a success based on how expensive it was, and that it actually led to layoffs at Insomniac Games, which was kind of unheard of, you have to ask yourselves if the activism of a few is truly worth the millions, if not eventual billions, that you'll lose in the sprint of that ideal. We already know that Geralt won't be the main character in the next Witcher game, as I previously reported on in my previous video, but now you're going to give the keys to the Ferrari, so to speak, to someone who somehow managed to ship a game about Spider-Man, who is arguably the most recognizable character in the world. And they still somehow managed to not turn it into a raging success that led to layoffs and loss of revenue. Are we being serious here? Also, I truly hope, since Mary Kenny loves Sweet Baby, that they do not find a way to inject their influence in any which way into Orion either. Because can you imagine if Cyberpunk's sequel gets announced 3 or 4 years from now, maybe even 5? And then we find out that Sweet Baby's influence is infused across everything within it? What will happen then? Will people actually avoid the game on principle alone? Will Sweet Baby even exist by then? I just really hope that Cyberpunk, and even Witcher's future, doesn't get ruined by the stink that is identity politics. I know CD Projekt Red is infused with ESG, but I mean, the Phantom Liberty expansion was made with that ESG involved, and I would argue that it still felt authentically cyberpunk and wasn't pandering at all, at least to my knowledge anyways. But what do you think about all of this? Finally, an update on Black Myth Wukong. The game has officially released its benchmark tool, which is pretty much a demo that allows players to run a cutscene in Wukong in order to test their PCs against the requirements needed to play the game before release. The benchmark is free, by the way. You can download it right now on Steam and try it yourself. But if you're on the fence about buying it, or you don't know if your PC can run it, well, this is your chance to try that out and see for yourself. And clearly it's something people are doing, since almost 90,000 people are currently trying the benchmark tool right now on Steam as of the making of this video. That's almost 2.5 times more people playing this cutscene demo of Wukong than there are people playing Helldivers 2 currently right now on Steam. To say that Wukong is going to be a big success is kind of an understatement. This game is going to sell a lot and be huge. It comes out next week as of the making of this video, and if it's getting almost 100,000 players for a benchmark tool, I can only imagine what it hits once it launches officially. Remember that Wukong apparently rejected Sweet Baby Inc. and is completely against identity politics. So could Black Myth Wukong become the next mega-based hit that breaks all the records, or will it falter and fall to shame? I guess time will tell. And I actually want to just add one final story to this video after considering it, which is that Remedy Entertainment has confirmed that Alan Wake 2 has still not made a profit since its release in October 2023. Some may say that's unfortunate, it deserved better, but not really. As someone who played this game prior to knowing it was involved with Sweet Baby, since we all didn't know about it until earlier this year, when I actually played Alan Wake 2, I couldn't believe how mid it was, and sometimes even downright awful as well. The reasons why I'm including this tidbit of information is because it's the cherry on top of everything else I spoke about here today. Alan Wake 2 didn't make a profit still, and people largely ignored it. It was consulted by Sweet Baby Inc. prior to anyone knowing what that even meant at the time, and yet even then, it still did poorly. This Kenny person at CD Projekt Red championed Sweet Baby, and this is the result of that sort of collaboration. A massive loss of revenue at the expense of identity politics and pandering. This is what happens when you consult and align with the stinky baby. So to say I am not overtly hyped for Cyberpunk's future knowing that a Sweet Baby defender is there is an understatement, but I figured you should know this anyways. And that's what I got for you today. Cyberpunk might be cooked, games are censoring themselves on purpose, and Wukong is already breaking records, and it's not even out yet. Thank you as always for watching. Subscribe, share, and like the video. Thanks to my patrons and members, and have a wonderful day, and I'll see you soon.